My husband's secretary answered his phone and called me the wife. Would you believe me if I told you that a single phone call, one that lasted less than 30 seconds, ripped the blindfold off my eyes after years of thinking I knew everything about my marriage? I know it sounds impossible. I know you're probably thinking, come on, who gets their world turned upside down from just picking up the phone? But stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll see exactly how one call sent me down a rabbit hole, pulled the rug out from under 20 years of my life, and forced me to question everything I thought I knew about the man I married. And trust me, it happened right here, in my own kitchen, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in Plano, Texas. The thing is, if you had looked at my life from the outside, you'd probably think I was living the suburban dream. Picture it, Plano, Texas, late spring, the air already thick with that early humidity you can almost taste, sunshine bouncing off new SUVs on Oak Street, neighbors waving as they drag their recycling bins to the curb. My house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, a 2-story brick with a white porch swing, a tire swing in the backyard for my daughter Olivia, and the kind of perfectly edged lawn that only exists in neighborhoods with strict HOA rules. I'm Ashley Johnson, 41 years old, mom of 2, wife to Brandon. My days are a blur of school drop-offs, PTA meetings, grocery runs to Trader Joe's, and the endless cycle of laundry, meal planning, and keeping up with the Joneses. Brandon and I have been married for 17 years. We met in college. He was the funny, ambitious finance major with a smile that made you forget your own name, and I was the English lit major with big dreams and a closet full of thrift store finds. We built this life together from nothing. Brandon's job at a mid-sized tech firm in Dallas paid for our home, our 2 kids' private school tuition, and the occasional date night at the Capitol Grill when we remembered to book a sitter. Our son Mason is 12, obsessed with Minecraft and Little League, and Olivia is 9, a force of nature in a pink tutu who believes the world should revolve around her ballet schedule and her best friend's birthday parties. Honestly, I thought I had this wife and mom thing down to an art. I packed organic lunches, kept the family group chat running, and made it to every school talent show. Even the ones where Mason's magic tricks involved nothing more than hiding behind a cardboard box. Brandon was busy, sure, but whose husband isn't? He worked hard, climbing the ladder at his company, sometimes traveling for conferences or staying late to finish reports. I told myself it was normal. That's what you do when you're building a good life. You hustle, you compromise, you trust. That Tuesday started like any other. I'd woken up before dawn, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the distant chirp of birds waking up in the backyard. I made coffee in my favorite mug, the one Olivia painted for me at summer camp last year. The glaze chipped in one corner but still perfect. The kitchen smelled like ground beans and a faint whiff of vanilla from the candle I always light before the chaos begins. By 7, I'd already orchestrated the daily ballet. Breakfast on the table, Mason's cleats found under the mudroom bench, Olivia's hair tamed into 2 neat braids. Brandon breezed in, tie half done, grabbing a travel mug and giving me a distracted kiss on the cheek. He was running late. Again. He'd been running late a lot lately. "Big project at work," he said, not looking at me as he scrolled through emails on his iPhone. "Heather double-booked my morning, so I might not make it to Mason's game tonight. Can you cover pickup?" Heather, his new secretary. I remembered her name only because Rachel, my best friend, had mentioned seeing a new face at the company holiday party back in January. "Sure," I said, trying not to let the disappointment show in my voice. "I'll handle it." The rest of the morning disappeared in a blur of errands, returning a rug to Home Goods, grabbing groceries at Trader Joe's, Olivia's favorite yogurt was on sale, and a quick stop at Starbucks for my standard venti iced coffee. I ran into Mrs. Carter, our next-door neighbor, in the parking lot. She asked about the upcoming HOA meeting, "Don't forget the landscaping fines," and gave me her usual rundown on everyone else's business. I joked about needing a second coffee just to survive the afternoon, but in truth, everything felt routine, predictable, safe. By 2 o'clock, I was back home, folding laundry in the upstairs hallway. My phone buzzed, a reminder to coordinate after-school pickups. Brandon was supposed to grab Mason from baseball practice, but with his crazy schedule, I knew I'd better check in. I dialed his number, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear as I sorted socks. 3 rings then. Click. A woman's voice. Calm, professional, but with a sharp edge. Brandon Johnson's phone. I froze, a half-folded t-shirt in my hands. Hi, this is Ashley, Brandon's wife. Is he there? There was a pause, longer than necessary. Then, with unmistakable emphasis, she replied, Oh, you're the wife. He's in a meeting. Can I take a message? The wife. Not his wife, not Mrs. Johnson. Just the wife. As if that label was the only thing she needed to know about me. I hung up, my cheeks burning. Something about her tone, the way she said it, made my skin crawl. Was it just me? Was I being paranoid? I tried to laugh it off, but my mind wouldn't let it go. I replayed her words over and over, turning them inside out, searching for meaning. The wife. What did she mean by that? Was she just being formal? Was this some new assistant etiquette I wasn't aware of? Or was there something else lurking beneath those 2 little words? I tried to shake it off. There were school pickups to organize, dinner to prep, and Mason's uniform to wash before his game. But every time I glanced at my phone, that phrase echoed in my head. It wasn't just the words, but the way she said them. Like she was reminding me of my place. Or maybe warning me? When Brandon got home that night, I watched him more closely than usual. He seemed tired, distracted, barely touching his dinner. Olivia chattered about ballet. Mason complained about homework, and I moved through the motions. But inside, I was buzzing with questions I couldn't ask. After the kids went to bed, I asked Brandon about his day. He rubbed his eyes, said it was just another stressful Tuesday, and changed the subject. When I mentioned the phone call, he just shrugged. Heather's new. Maybe she's awkward on the phone, I don't know. Then he kissed my forehead, told me not to worry, and headed off to answer a few more emails. But something had shifted. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles in the dark, and tried to convince myself it was nothing, that I was reading too much into it. But if I'm honest, that one sentence opened a fracture inside me, a hairline crack in the foundation of my marriage I'd never noticed before. The next morning, everything felt sharper, more fragile. I watched Brandon leave for work, his tie perfectly knotted, his cologne lingering in the hallway after he left. I noticed for the first time how he tucked his phone into his jacket pocket, how he kept his screen turned away from me when he checked messages. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. But little things started to add up. A text message he answered in the garage, a late-night call he took outside for better reception, receipts for lunches that didn't match his usual routine. Small, stupid details that wouldn't have meant anything if I hadn't been looking for them. Rachel noticed it too. She's been my best friend since Mason was in preschool, the kind of friend who drops off cookie dough when you've had a bad day and never misses a chance to gossip about PTA drama. We met up for coffee at Panera Bread, our midweek escape from the endless to-do lists. She noticed I was distracted, picking at my blueberry muffin. You okay? You seem off. I told her about the phone call, about Heather, about the way Brandon had been acting lately. She didn't roll her eyes or tell me I was crazy. Instead, she squeezed my hand and said, Ash, women know. Trust your gut. That was the problem. I didn't trust my gut. Not yet. I kept telling myself I had nothing to worry about. That Brandon was loyal, that our marriage was solid, that Heather was just a secretary doing her job. I wanted to believe it, needed to believe it. But even as I said it out loud, the doubt crept in like a slow, cold draft under the door. A few days later, I decided to stop by Brandon's office in Dallas, something I'd done a handful of times over the years, usually when I was dropping off a forgotten lunch or bringing the kids to say hi after a dentist appointment. The building was a glossy glass cube off North Central Expressway, filled with people who wore smartwatches and talked about IPOs over green juices in the lobby. I checked in with the receptionist and rode the elevator to the 5th floor, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. Heather met me at the door to Brandon's office. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with sleek dark hair and a wardrobe that screamed corporate chic. She smiled, but her eyes flicked over me like she was sizing me up. "You must be Ashley," she said, stretching out my name like it was a challenge. "Brandon's just finishing a call. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" I declined, suddenly self-conscious in my jeans and Target sweater. Her desk was immaculate, decorated with a single photo of a golden retriever and a tiny cactus. No ring on her finger, I noticed. She tapped her nails on the desk, watching me with a look I couldn't quite place. Sympathy? Pity? Or something else entirely. Brandon emerged a few minutes later, surprised to see me but covering it with a quick smile. "Hey, Ash, what's up?" I handed him the folder of paperwork he'd forgotten and forced a smile of my own. Heather lingered in the doorway, her smile frozen, before excusing herself to check on a delivery. As I left, I heard her say quietly, "I'll make sure Brandon stays on track today." The words felt loaded, somehow, like a warning or a promise. I walked back to my car feeling more confused than ever. Was I imagining things? Was this just office politics? Or was there something more? I tried to let it go, to file it away as just another weird interaction in the endless parade of PTA moms, soccer coaches, and work acquaintances that orbit our lives. But I couldn't. Not after that phone call. Not after the way Heather said, "the wife." Not after the way Brandon looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. I wish I could say that was the end of it. That I went home, made dinner, and forgot all about Heather and her pointed little comments. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because the truth was, I still didn't know the worst of it. And as much as I tried to convince myself everything was fine, there was a tiny, persistent voice in the back of my mind whispering, "You're missing something." If only I had known then just how right that voice would turn out to be. I wish I could say that after that phone call, life returned to normal. That I managed to brush off Heather's voice in my ear and the odd, careful way Brandon had been moving through our house. But if you've ever had that feeling, like you're standing at the edge of something you can't see, toes curling over an invisible drop, you'll know why I couldn't let it go. Every time I folded a load of towels in our spotless laundry room, or rinsed strawberries for Olivia's lunchbox, or listened to Mason drone on about his science project, there was a part of me that was somewhere else. Somewhere colder, sharper, waiting for the next sign. Plano in early spring is a weird sort of beautiful. The air gets warm enough in the afternoons that you start to believe summer is coming. But every few days, a cold front sweeps down from Oklahoma, and you remember that winter isn't quite done with you yet. Our house sits on Maple Avenue, a wide, tree-lined street with identical brick homes and perfect green lawns, at least the ones that have HOA-compliant grass. I'd always loved that about our neighborhood, the sameness of it. It felt safe, predictable, like nothing truly bad could ever happen here. That week, I threw myself into the routine more than ever. Maybe, I thought, if I just kept moving, I wouldn't have time to dwell on the awkwardness of that phone call, or the way Heather's voice had curled around the word wife like it meant something more. Monday mornings are always chaos. Olivia never wants to get out of bed, Mason forgets his gym shorts, and Brandon is usually running late, gulping down burnt coffee and checking his email at the breakfast table. He barely looked at me as he left, just pressed a distracted kiss to my cheek and mumbled, "See you tonight." Except that night, he didn't come home until almost 10. I'd kept dinner warm, a rotisserie chicken from Costco, mashed potatoes and broccoli, nothing fancy, but by the time I heard the garage door rumble open, the kids were already asleep and the food was cold. I watched him come in, tie loose, hair mussed, shoulders slumped. He looked tired, or maybe just defeated. I tried to read his face, but he barely met my eyes. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice light, careful. He nodded, dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. "Yeah, just A lot going on at work. Sorry I'm late. I wanted to ask about Heather. I wanted to ask why she answered his phone, why she said what she did, but instead I just nodded and started clearing the table, feeling the distance between us stretch and tighten like a wire. As I scraped plates into the trash and loaded the dishwasher, I heard him in the living room, muttering into his phone. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught a few. Deadline, Heather, next quarter. It could have meant anything, or nothing. But my heart pounded anyway. Tuesday was PTA day. I sat in the cafeteria at Olivia's elementary school, sipping lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup, surrounded by a sea of chatty moms and the faint smell of disinfectant. My best friend Rachel slid into the seat beside me, dropping her bag with a thud. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, eyeing me over the rim of her Yeti tumbler. I forced a smile. "It's just, Brandon's been working a lot. I think he's stressed. And his new secretary is a lot." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Heather, right? I met her at the company picnic last month. She knows how to make an entrance." I laughed, but it sounded thin. "She answered his phone the other day. Called me the wife. It was weird." Rachel's eyes widened. "Like, on purpose? That's odd." I nodded, feeling strangely comforted that someone else thought so too. "I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it." Rachel reached over, squeezed my hand. "You're not crazy. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is." Her words stuck with me as I drove home, the Texas sun glinting off the windshield, my hands tight on the steering wheel. That night, after dinner, I tried to get Brandon to talk. I asked him about his day, about the kids, about anything that might get him to open up. But every answer was short, clipped, like he was reciting lines from a script. When I mentioned Heather, he just shrugged. "She's just efficient," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Keeps me on track." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But then there were the little things. The way he started taking his phone with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. The way he laughed at texts I couldn't see. The way he started coming home later and later, blaming end-of-quarter madness at the office. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I really did. But every night as I lay in bed next to him, listening to his steady breathing, I felt more and more alone. Thursday afternoon, I decided to surprise him at work. I'd volunteered to drop off cupcakes for a coworker's birthday. Another opportunity to prove to myself that nothing was wrong. The office was in a sleek building off Legacy Drive, all glass and chrome, with a fancy reception area and the faint smell of printer ink. I spotted Heather immediately. She was perched behind a standing desk, typing furiously, her perfectly manicured nails clicking on the keyboard. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her red lipstick was flawless. She looked up as I approached, and for a split second, something flickered in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "Hi, you must be Ashley," she said, turning on a bright, professional smile. "Brandon mentioned you might stop by." I smiled back, trying to keep my tone light. "Just dropping off cupcakes for the team." She stood up, smoothing her pencil skirt. "That's so sweet of you. Brandon's in a meeting, but I'll make sure he gets one. He's been running himself ragged lately." Was there something in the way she said it, or was I imagining it? Her eyes lingered on me a moment too long, and then she glanced at the conference room, where I could see Brandon through the glass, head bent over a stack of papers. Heather leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He's lucky to have you, you know. Not every wife is so understanding." I felt my cheeks flush. "Well, we try to support each other. It's a partnership." She nodded, her smile never wavering. "Of course." I left the cupcakes on the counter, smiled at the receptionist, and hurried out to my car, my heart pounding. I sat there for a few minutes, watching people stream in and out of the lobby, trying to calm myself down. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Heather was just being friendly. But the words stuck in my mind. Not every wife is so understanding. That night, Brandon came home even later. I waited up for him, sitting on the couch with a book I wasn't actually reading. When he finally walked in, he looked surprised to see me. "Hey," he said, dropping his bag. "You're up late." "I wanted to talk," I said, keeping my voice steady. He hesitated, then sat down beside me. "Is everything okay?" I tried to find the right words. "Brandon, is there something going on at work? Something you're not telling me?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking tired. "It's just a lot of pressure right now. Deadlines, budgets. Nothing for you to worry about." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. "Heather seems very involved. She mentioned you've been working late." He bristled, just a little. "That's her job. She keeps things running. I can't do everything myself. I let it go, for the moment. But the next day, as I was going through the mail, I found an envelope from our credit card company. I almost tossed it in the pile of bills, but something made me open it. Inside was a statement with a few charges I didn't recognize. A florist in downtown Dallas, a high-end restaurant in Frisco, a boutique hotel. My stomach dropped. I scrolled through the charges, trying to make sense of them. The dinner was on a Thursday night, the same night Brandon said he was working late. The florist charge was for a bouquet sent to an address I didn't recognize. The hotel charge was for a conference room rental, but there was no conference Brandon had mentioned. I confronted him that night, holding the statement in my hands. "Brandon, what's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He glanced at the paper, then shrugged. "Work expenses. Sometimes I have to entertain clients. Heather handles a lot of the bookings. But you didn't mention any of this. Why the flowers? Why the hotel?" He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "It's just business, Ash. Heather takes care of those details so I don't have to. She's efficient, like I said." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something didn't add up. Why would Heather be sending flowers to someone on our joint credit card? Why book a restaurant we used to go to for anniversaries for a work dinner? I decided to do a little digging of my own. That weekend, as Brandon took Mason to soccer practice, I called the florist, pretending to confirm an order. The woman on the phone was polite, but when I asked who the flowers were sent to, she hesitated. Finally, she said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't give out that information." My heart pounded as I hung up. I tried the hotel next. The receptionist told me the conference room had been booked by Heather Martinez for a private business meeting, but wouldn't say more. I felt like I was losing my mind, chasing shadows and half-truths. Sunday afternoon, Rachel came over with iced coffees and a sympathetic ear. We sat on the patio, watching the kids chase each other across the backyard. "I don't know what to think," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "He says it's all work stuff, but something feels wrong." Rachel frowned. "Have you talked to Heather directly?" I shook my head. "Not really, just that one weird conversation at the office." Rachel glanced at her phone. "Maybe you should. Or maybe you should keep an eye on things for a while. See if there's a pattern." I nodded, grateful for her support. But the truth was, I was scared to dig any deeper. What if I found something I couldn't unsee? Monday morning, I woke up early. The house was quiet, the sky outside still streaked with pink and gold. I made coffee, packed lunches, and tried to pretend everything was normal. But as I watched Brandon get ready for work, tie perfectly knotted, shoes shined, phone in his hand, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. When had things gotten so complicated? When had I stopped being his partner and started being the wife he kept secrets from? That afternoon, as I picked up Olivia from dance class, my phone buzzed. A new email from our joint account. It was a reservation confirmation for a dinner for two at Bella Note, the Italian place we used to go for special occasions. The date was next Friday. Brandon hadn't mentioned a thing. My hands shook as I scrolled through the email. Was he planning something for us? Or was this another work event I wasn't invited to? I forwarded the email to myself, just in case. That night I tried to act normal, but every word between us felt loaded. Every glance was edged with suspicion. When I asked if he had plans for Friday, he just shrugged. Nothing special. Might have to work late. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan. My mind raced with possibilities. Was I imagining things? Was I turning into one of those paranoid wives you see in movies? Or was there really something going on? The next morning, while sorting laundry, I found a receipt in the pocket of Brandon's suit jacket. It was for dinner at Bella Notte, last Thursday. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine, dessert for 2. But he'd told me he was working late at the office. My heart sank. I stared at the receipt, willing it to make sense. Maybe it was a business dinner. Maybe Heather was there. Or maybe someone else. But I still didn't know the worst of it. If only I'd realized then just how much more there was to uncover. Because as much as I tried to pretend everything was fine, deep down I knew I was missing something. And whatever it was about to change everything. My mind was spinning, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every time I tried to rationalize that receipt, my gut twisted tighter. I kept replaying the details. Bella Notte, Thursday night, 2 entrees, a bottle of Cabernet. I remembered that night. Olivia had a fever, and Brandon texted that he'd be stuck at the office late, some last-minute quarterly reports. I'd texted back, "No worries, hope it doesn't go too late," and he hadn't replied until almost midnight. He'd come home exhausted, kissed me on the forehead, and went straight to the shower. Now, holding that receipt, I realized how little I'd actually questioned him. Was I being naive? Or was I just so desperate to believe everything was fine that I'd ignored all the warning signs? I tucked the receipt into my planner next to the PTA meeting agenda and tried to focus on the day ahead. But the more I tried to keep up appearances, the harder it got. That afternoon, sitting in the carpool lane at Plano West Elementary, I watched other moms chatting by their SUVs, laughing about weekend soccer games, already planning the next wine night. I wondered how many of them had felt like this. Unsure, suspicious, but too afraid to say anything. My phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "Wine night at my place Friday? You in?" I almost laughed. If only she knew how much I needed that. At home, I went into autopilot. Snacks for Mason, homework with Olivia, dinner prep, laundry. All the while, I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting Brandon to text me something that would make it all make sense. But nothing came. He was in meetings again, Heather keeping his schedule on track. The words started to feel loaded, like they were hiding something bigger. That night, after the kids were asleep, I called Rachel. I started with small talk, PTA, the new math teacher, whether I was bringing brownies or cookies for the bake sale. Then finally, I blurted out, "Have you ever found something weird of Mark's? Like a receipt or a text or something that just didn't add up?" Rachel went quiet for a beat. "Are you okay, Ash?" she asked, her voice suddenly gentle. Is something going on?" I hesitated, then told her about the receipt, the phone call, Heather's weird familiarity. "Maybe I'm losing it. Maybe I'm just stressed," I said, desperate for her to tell me I was overreacting. Instead, Rachel said, "You're not crazy. Trust your gut. But don't jump to conclusions. Just keep your eyes open, okay?" The way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach. Brandon came in late, again, and I pretended to be asleep. I couldn't bring myself to ask. Not yet. The next day, I tried to distract myself by volunteering for the Spring Carnival Committee. Mrs. Carter, my next-door neighbor and the unofficial queen bee of our HOA, was there in her usual pastel sweater set, delegating tasks. She asked if Brandon would be helping with the dunk tank again this year, and I heard myself say, "If he's not working late, sure." She gave me a look, one of those looks that says she knows more than she's letting on. After the meeting, I lingered in the parking lot, watching the other moms pile into their Escalades and Tahoes, everyone so put together, so certain. I wondered if their lives were as perfect as they looked on Facebook. That afternoon, Brandon texted, "Heather's dropping off some files at the house. Can you let her in?" My stomach dropped. Why was his secretary coming to our house? I wanted to say no, to demand an explanation, but instead I just replied, "Sure." A little after 4, the doorbell rang. I checked the Ring camera, Heather, holding a leather briefcase and a Starbucks cup. I opened the door. She smiled, too brightly, and handed me the briefcase. "I hope this isn't a bad time," she chirped. "Brandon left these at the office and I was headed this way anyway. Oh, and I brought you a caramel macchiato. He said it's your favorite." She glanced around, taking in the foyer, the family photos on the wall, Olivia's soccer cleats by the stairs. She handed Mason a sticker from her purse and bent down to say hi to Olivia like she'd known her forever. I tried to hide my discomfort. "Thanks," I said, "but you didn't have to go out of your way." Heather shrugged. "It's no trouble. Brandon's been swamped. I just try to keep him organized, you know? He's hopeless without a little help." She laughed, but it sounded forced. As she left, she turned back and said, "Tell Brandon I'll see him at 7. 7? I thought he was coming home for dinner." I smiled tightly, closed the door, and locked it behind her. That night, Brandon came home late. Again. I confronted him, holding out the briefcase. "Heather dropped this off. She said she'll see you at 7? He barely looked up from his phone. "Oh, right. We have a call with the Chicago office. Quarterly numbers." He kissed my cheek and disappeared into his office. I stood in the kitchen, fuming. Was I really supposed to believe that? The next 2 days, I became someone I barely recognized. I checked his credit card statements online, searching for anything unusual. Flowers, jewelry, hotel charges. I scrolled through his Instagram, looking for comments or likes from Heather. I even checked the calendar on our shared family app for any unexplained appointments. Nothing. Everything looked normal. But I knew it wasn't. I started Googling Heather. Her LinkedIn, her Facebook, even her old college's alumni page. She was single, no kids, lived in a condo in McKinney. Her posts were all work events, happy hours, group pics with coworkers. No mention of Brandon, but she'd tagged our office's address more than once. Desperate for answers, I decided to do something I'd never done before. That Friday night, after Brandon got in the shower, I picked up his phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking. I told myself I was just looking for reassurance, that I'd find nothing, that I could finally sleep again. But as I scrolled through his messages, my heart pounded louder and louder. Most were work-related, reminders, meeting links, project updates. But then I saw the thread with Heather. It started innocently enough. "Can you send over the draft? Don't forget the board call at 3. But then, dinner was great last night. Thanks for listening. You always know how to make me laugh. The wife asked about Bellinate, lol." My stomach dropped. I scrolled further. "You're the best. Don't know what I'd do without you. Happy to help. Just let me know next time she's around. Don't want things to get awkward. Appreciate you keeping this between us." I took screenshots, my fingers trembling. I barely heard the shower turn off. I put the phone back, heart racing, and tried to act normal as Brandon came back into the bedroom. He smiled, completely unaware. "Long day. Mind if I crash early?" I nodded, barely able to speak. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, going over every detail in my head. The next day, I tried to keep it together, but everything felt different. I watched Brandon with the kids, laughing, helping Mason build a Lego set, quizzing Olivia on her spelling words. He looked so normal, so him. Was I really about to blow up our whole life over a few texts? Was I reading too much into things? After dinner, as I was cleaning up, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened it. "We need to talk, woman to woman." Heather. My hands went cold. I stared at the screen, not sure if I should answer. What could she possibly want to say to me? Was this some kind of sick game? Or was she trying to warn me about something? I typed back. About what? Almost immediately she replied, It's about Brandon. Can you meet tomorrow? Starbucks, Park in Preston, 10 a.m.? I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what she might say. Would she admit they were having an affair? Would she threaten me, try to intimidate me? Or would she lie, try to cover for Brandon? The next morning, I got the kids ready for their Saturday swim lessons, told Brandon I was meeting Rachel for coffee, and drove to Starbucks with my heart pounding in my chest. Heather was already there, sitting by the window, a folder on the table in front of her. She looked different, tired, anxious, not the perky secretary I'd met before. As I sat down, she smiled weakly. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. I know this is awkward. I stared at her, unsure what to say. She took a deep breath. Look, I know things have gotten weird, and I owe you an explanation. But first, I want you to know I'm not sleeping with your husband. The words hung in the air. I didn't know whether to believe her, to laugh, or to cry. She slid the folder toward me. Brandon's in trouble at work. Big trouble. He's been covering it up for months. I've been helping him, but it's gotten out of control. She explained everything. How the company had lost a major client. How Brandon had been scrambling to keep the board from finding out. How he'd started using his personal accounts to cover business expenses. Heather had stepped in to organize things, even running personal errands, because he was barely keeping it together. The dinner at Bellinate? She'd gone with him to meet a potential investor, hoping to save the project. The texts? Out of context, they looked bad, but she insisted there was nothing romantic between them. I sat there, stunned. All this time, I'd been so sure he was cheating. But the truth was somehow messier, and in some ways, even scarier. Heather's voice shook. I called you the wife, because some clients were crossing boundaries, calling Brandon late, trying to get him alone. I thought if they knew you were in the picture, they'd back off. I shouldn't have said it like that, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to say. I felt angry, relieved, humiliated, and guilty, all at once. He needs help, Ashley, and I can't be the only one who knows what's going on. I drove home in a daze. Brandon was in the backyard, grilling burgers for the kids. He looked up as I pulled in, smiled. I took a deep breath, walked over, and said quietly, We need to talk. We sat at the patio table, the kids playing on the swing set, the smell of charcoal in the air. I told him everything, what I'd found, what Heather had told me. At first he tried to deny it, but as I pressed, his shoulders slumped. He looked defeated. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could fix it. But it's bigger than me now. We talked for hours, both of us crying at points. He promised to come clean to his boss, to get help. I promised to stand by him, but only if he promised to be honest with me from now on. I wish I could say things magically got better after that. But trust, once cracked, doesn't heal overnight. We started seeing a marriage counselor. Brandon went to HR, told them everything. There were still hard days when I wondered if I'd ever really know what was going on. But in a strange way, that phone call, that one moment of suspicion, forced us to finally talk, to really talk, about everything we'd been avoiding. And just when I thought I'd uncovered everything, something happened that changed my perspective on all of it. I remember waking up the next morning with that heavy, lingering ache in my chest. The kind of ache that comes from too much crying, too little sleep, and a mind that won't slow down, even for a second. Sunlight was streaming through the blinds in thin, golden lines, and for a moment, I let myself pretend everything was normal. The house was quiet, too quiet, actually. Brandon must have gotten up early to take Olivia and Mason to school, giving me a little breathing room. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every word of our conversation the night before, every tear, every promise and apology. It all felt so raw, so shaky, like a wound trying to scab over, but you keep bumping into it, reopening it again and again. I dragged myself out of bed and padded to the kitchen. The house still smelled faintly of the coffee Brandon had brewed before leaving. There was a sticky note on the counter, written in his rushed, blocky handwriting. "Took kids to school. Call if you need anything. Love you." I stood there, staring at those words, "love you," and wondered what they even meant now. Did loving someone mean always trusting them no matter what? Or did it mean holding them accountable, even when it hurt? I wrapped my hands around a mug, letting the warmth sink in, and tried to ground myself in something simple, breathing, sipping, existing. But my mind was already spinning through the next steps. Marriage counseling, HR, the practical fallout of everything I'd just uncovered. I wondered how many other women had stood in kitchens just like mine, staring at notes just like this, questioning everything they thought they knew. By the time noon rolled around, I'd managed to shower and pull myself together. I even answered a few PTA emails, half-heartedly RSVPing to a bake sale and a fundraiser, both of which felt laughably trivial in the context of my life right now. I was supposed to meet Rachel for coffee at Panera Bread, our usual spot. I needed her, needed the grounding presence of someone who'd known me before any of this, before the cracks started showing. I drove through the wide, sunny streets of Plano, passing the soccer fields where I'd spent so many Saturdays, the Target where I could practically shop blindfolded, the Starbucks drive-through with the line of minivans and SUVs stretching around the block. Everything looked so normal, so perfectly suburban, but I felt like a ghost walking through my own life. Rachel was already waiting for me at a corner table, tapping her phone, her expression pinched with worry. She stood up as soon as she saw me, pulling me into a tight hug. "You look exhausted," she said, searching my face for clues. I didn't have the energy to pretend, so I just nodded, blinking back tears. We sat down with our oversized coffees, steam curling between us. I told her everything. About the phone call, Heather, the late nights, Brandon's confessions. She listened, interrupting only to squeeze my hand or murmur something supportive. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you believe him?" she finally asked. I stared at the swirl of foam in my cup. "I want to, but I don't know if I can yet. I keep going over every detail, every time he hesitated or looked away. I feel like I'm losing my mind." Rachel nodded. "That's normal. You're not crazy. You're just wounded, and it takes time to heal." We talked for another hour, circling around the same questions, the same fears. She promised to check in on me, to help with carpool, to be there whenever I needed to vent or cry or just sit in silence. I left Panera feeling slightly less alone, but no less uncertain. When I got home, I found Brandon in the backyard, throwing a baseball with Mason. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grass, and for a moment, they looked like any father and son, laughing, shouting, completely absorbed in their game. I watched from the kitchen window, feeling a strange mix of tenderness and bitterness. How could things look so perfect on the outside, when I felt so broken on the inside? Later that evening, after dinner and homework and baths, when the house was finally quiet, Brandon and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared hundreds of ordinary, forgettable meals. This time, everything felt different. He looked tired, older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "I called my boss today," he said quietly. Told him everything, about the numbers, the stress, how I'd let things get out of hand. He rubbed his forehead, not meeting my eyes. "It was humiliating, but it's done. They're going to audit the accounts, bring in someone to help. I might be demoted, maybe even fired. I don't know yet." A cold knot formed in my stomach, but I forced myself to nod. "We'll deal with it. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." He reached for my hand, his grip warm but trembling. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I should have told you sooner. His voice broke, and he looked away. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me like this." It hurt, but I understood. Shame has a way of making even the strongest people hide from the ones they love most. I squeezed his hand, trying to communicate forgiveness, or at least the willingness to try. Days blurred together after that. We started seeing a marriage counselor, a gentle woman named Dr. Franklin, whose office smelled like lavender and old books. She asked hard questions, pushed us to examine the ways we'd stopped communicating, the small resentments that had built up over years of routine and obligation. Some sessions ended with breakthroughs, tears and hugs and promises to do better. Others ended in stubborn silence, both of us too raw to find the right words. Brandon spent more time at home, helping with homework, making dinner, even volunteering for carpool duty. The kids noticed the difference. Olivia asked if Daddy was on vacation, while Mason just seemed happy to have someone to toss a ball with after school. I tried to let myself enjoy those moments, but part of me stayed on guard, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And then, just when I thought we were turning a corner, something happened that flipped everything I thought I knew on its head. It was a Thursday afternoon, hot and sticky, the kind of Texas day where you can feel the humidity even in the shade. I was at the grocery store, pushing a cart through the aisles of Costco, trying to remember if we needed more paper towels or if I was just making excuses to avoid going home to the quiet, tense house. My phone buzzed in my purse, a text from Heather. "Can you meet me? Panera, 15 minutes. Please, it's important." My heart jumped into my throat. I hadn't spoken to Heather since that awkward meeting at Starbucks, and I had no idea what she could possibly want now. For a split second, I considered ignoring her, but curiosity and dread won out. I checked out as quickly as I could, loaded the groceries into the trunk, and drove back to Panera, my mind racing with possibilities. Heather was waiting at a table near the window, twisting a napkin in her hands. She looked different, tired, anxious, her usual composure cracked at the edges. When she saw me, she stood up, offering a tentative smile. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you probably don't want to see me." I sat down, folding my hands in my lap. "What's this about, Heather?" She took a deep breath, glancing around as if she was afraid someone might overhear. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about your husband, and about me." I stiffened, bracing myself for some kind of confession. "What about you?" Heather hesitated, then looked me straight in the eye. "I know you think I crossed a line with Brandon, and I did in some ways, but not the way you think. There was never anything romantic between us. I swear. But I let myself get too involved. I started thinking of myself as, I don't know, his protector, his fixer." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "When things got bad at work, he leaned on me more and more. I started handling things that weren't really my business, covering for him, hiding things from the rest of the staff. I thought I was helping, but I was making it worse." I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of deceit. But all I saw was exhaustion, regret. "Why did you answer his phone that day?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you call me the wife?" She winced. "That was stupid." I was annoyed. One of the clients kept calling Brandon after hours, and she was getting inappropriate. I answered the phone to try to set boundaries, but when you called, I thought you were another client. When I realized it was you, I panicked and said something dumb. I didn't mean to disrespect you, I just didn't know what else to say. The words hung between us, heavy and awkward. For the first time, I saw Heather not as a threat, but as another person caught in a mess she didn't fully understand. Someone who'd tried to help, and ended up making things worse. She reached into her purse, pulling out a crumpled envelope. "I wanted to give you this. It's a letter I wrote to HR, explaining everything I did. I'm resigning next week. I can't keep doing this. It's not healthy for me or for your family." I took the envelope, my hands shaking. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure what else to say. We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the cafe swirling around us, clinking dishes, murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, Heather stood up, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I really am sorry, she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. For everything. I watched her walk out, feeling a strange sense of relief. Not closure exactly, but the end of a chapter I hadn't even realized I was living. When I got home, Brandon was waiting for me in the living room, his hands clasped in his lap. I handed him the envelope, watching as he read Heather's letter, his expression shifting from confusion to gratitude to shame. I didn't realize how much I was leaning on her, he admitted. I should have seen it sooner. I'm sorry. We sat together in silence, the weight of everything that had happened settling around us like dust. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth, messy, complicated, painful truth, was finally out in the open. That night, after we put the kids to bed, Brandon and I sat outside on the back patio, listening to the cicadas singing in the humid Texas night. We talked, really talked, about everything. Our fears, our regrets, the ways we'd let each other down. We made promises. Not to be perfect, because we knew better than that by now. But to be honest. To try. To not give up, even when it would be easier to walk away. Looking back, I realize now that the real betrayal wasn't about another woman, or even about secrets at work. It was about the ways we'd stopped seeing each other. The ways we'd let our lives become parallel lines, running side by side but never really intersecting. And as painful as it was, I'm grateful for that phone call, for the chaos it unleashed. It forced us to stop pretending, to tear down the walls we'd built between us brick by brick. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy to hear. Trust me, it wasn't easy to live. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the things that break us are the very things that make us stronger, that force us to grow, to change, to see ourselves and the people we love in a new light. So now I want to know, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted Heather sooner? Trusted Brandon less or more? Let me know in the comments below. And if you think this story was intense, just wait until you hear what happened the week after this, because life in suburbia, it's never as simple as it seems. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next confession. I promise, you won't believe what's coming next.